Hey guys, welcome to our SoulFam Podcast, where I interview space holders from all over the world. I'm your host. My name is Karolina, and I am the connection catalyst. I help spiritual entrepreneurs experience deeper connection with themselves, with others, and with the whole universe. Today on the show, we have Beth Weinstein, the Psychedelic Business Coach. Welcome to the show, Beth. How are you doing?
Aw, thank you so much for having me, Carolina. It's so nice to meet you and hang out with you today.
It is super nice to meet you too, especially that I'm all about business, I'm all about psychedelics, and I'm all about spirituality. So we have a lot to talk about today. And I would really love to focus on this idea of a spiritual business. But before we jump into that and all these topics and psychedelics and all these exciting things, I would love you to share a little bit of your story. I'm really curious how you have started your journey as a psychedelic business coach, but also just your spiritual journey, because, for some people, it's been always a part of their life. For some people, it has started from some like huge awakening, or for me, it started from a mushroom experience. So it's very different for everyone. So I'm curious about your journey up till now.
Nice. Thank you so much for asking. I am one of those people that had, I would say, my very first spiritual experience at a pretty young age. Of course, I didn't know what was going on at that time, but it was probably around like 8 years old or so. And one of my very first experiences I remember was the moment where I remember I was staring off into the sky in my backyard, and I had this memory of just realizing that we die. It was like this moment, and I remember this like wave of energy coming over me where I then just started questioning, well, wait, if we die, what's this all about? At a very young age, I really started questioning, like, why are we here? What's the purpose? Like, what's the point of all this? And then I started having like these kind of activations that to this day I have no idea what they were, but it came from just like being like I used to spend a lot of time outdoors. I grew up in California, and these used to happen when I was laying down on the earth, just laying there in kind of, what would now be described as like a meditational space. But as a kid, it was just like being and nowhere to go, nothing to worry about. And I started having these activations. And my whole life I was raised in a very typical American family that was like, you just go to college, you get a job, you work, and then you die. And it was like I was programmed at a very young age because of my parents to just get a good job and like go to college. And they never brought up this idea of like life having meaning or purpose or you being connected to your work. It was all about like just do well in school and blah, blah, blah. So, I had my first psychedelic experience at the age of 14 without even really understanding what it was that I was taking. It was with LSD. And I actually spent the whole trip by myself in my bedroom because I took the tab of acid right before my curfew, which, at 14 was, I think, at 10 p.m. And the acid kicked in when I got home, and I was all alone. And I laid, I laid there in my bedroom. I had to be quiet because my parents were in the other room, and I laid there. And that was this moment where I realized that our mind is capable of so much more. And I remember at that very young age really questioning, like, wait a second, if this tiny little thing is making me experience this, like, what else is there? There has to be more. So I was always very inquisitive. I always spent time trying to figure out like how the mind works, what's going on. Of course, by the time I got towards college, I was told like, just make sure you go into a direction of a job and career. But I really started to question like, well, wait, aren't we supposed to do what makes us happy? Like, what's the point of this? But of course, I was afraid, and I took the safe route and went to school and then got a job because that was what I was supposed to do. But I started noticing at that like pretty young age, my very first like real career, that I was miserable. Like I liked aspects of the job, but I knew it wasn't what I was here to do for the rest of my life. And from a very young age, I used to play this game when I was a kid with my friend called City, where we owned our own businesses and we used to pretend we were traveling around the world. And by the time I was in my 20s and people asked, like, where do you see yourself in the future? I used to say, well, I see myself having a business or, being part of a business. And of course, but I was working in corporate America. And through a series of, very unlikely events and initiations, in my 20s, I spent my 20s, I was still, quote, doing drugs back then, but I was actually getting into like that really destructive habit of working at a job that I hated, being miserable all the time. I was living in New York City. And then I was, drinking and partying and doing drugs just to numb out the pain of how much I hated my life. And I was spiraling downward, and I noticed this. And luckily, I took up running. I was always very athletic as a kid. So I took up running as the one and only thing in New York City that didn't involve getting wasted all the time. So as I took up running, the one thing that I started to notice was that the running was making me feel the same way I used to feel when I used to go to raves when I was younger and take ecstasy and other drugs. And the running made me feel the same way. And I was like, well, wait a second, like this feels familiar. And I really like this positive feeling. How does this work? What's going on in the mind? So I was always kind of questioning, like what it was all about and how things worked. And at the same time, going through these initiations, and I was always on a spiritual path. I studied psychology in college and got onto a Buddhist path. I started meditating, like really questioning everything and reading a lot of self-development books and doing things like Landmark and all these, programs in my 20s, and I'm now in my 40s. And then suddenly, of course, like this was like right after my Saturn return or during my Saturn return, my dad died prematurely. It was pretty quick and sudden and out of the blue. And my dad literally worked at the same company his whole entire career. And then he retired, and then he died only a few years later. And I remember experiencing this. And that was the moment where I was like, well, wait a second, like, he worked at this job. I mean, I think he liked it. I don't think he loved it. And then, he just died like right after. What is the point? And I really at that point was like, this can't be the reason why we're born here. Like, this can't be the reason why humans exist, is just to make money and buy a house and then like be miserable and then die. So that's when I started having this really intense spiritual experience after that. Again, like questioning everything, making changes in my life. And, years later, there was just this moment where I had been going through career transitions. Like I had lost jobs, lost my father, gone through all these like deep initiations, and really just started questioning, like, what the hell am I going to do? And by then I was in my, early to mid 30s, and I hired my first ever coach. And what came out of it was realizing like I actually really wanted to start a business. I had been running. Running was the one thing that saved me from destruction, with the drugs, the alcohol, the depression, anxiety, the New York City life. And I had gotten really into running to the point where I was running marathons and ultra marathons. And I had worked in the fashion industry, and I kept saying, well, what if there was a better running clothing brand? Like I kept dreaming of making this running clothing brand. And I went on with this dream for about 8 years. And finally, when I was going through all these major changes and the career coach is like, well, what do you really want? I was like, well, I actually want to give this running clothing business a try. I've been thinking about it for 8 years. So, and I kind of got to that point where it was like, I was going through so many transitions. I was like, well, it doesn't hurt to start this and see what happens. So I started up that business. It was very challenging, but I got it off the ground all by myself, and it actually did okay. Like it got out there, it was in the public, it was being shipped all over the world. It was, being published in magazines. And through that, when I had started it up, I started getting a lot of people coming to me asking for help on how to start a business. Like, wow, you started this all by yourself. Can you help me? And this went on for a few years where I was like, God, why are so many people stuck? Like, why don't they know how to do this themselves? Like, I just assumed, because I had figured out how to do it by myself, but I had also, it's like my personality. I had been very entrepreneurial since I was a kid. I had worked in this industry, but I realized people kept coming to me for help, and I would help them for free. But then I would see them a year or two later, and they had done nothing with their business. And I'm like, well, why are so many people struggling? And then it was like the universe kept telling me, you know, people would tell me like, well, maybe you should become a coach. Like maybe you should charge money for this. At the same time, when this was all happening, I got really into ayahuasca. This was about 10 years ago. You know, I'd always worked with psychedelics, but I got into the ceremonial relationship with ayahuasca and psilocybin and really dove in deep. So I was having these like intense awakenings with psychedelics, you know, in addition to Buddhism and meditation, and then also, you know, just everything else in the world, you know, things that we can't help, like having an awakening during this time. And that's when, you know, it kind of came through the medicine work where I was like, well, what if I did try to make this a business? Like, I didn't even know there was such a thing as a business coach. And so I just started helping some of my friends. And I said to one of my friends, like, you know, like, let me test this out with you and, you know, see how this goes. And then the next person that asked me for help, I said, look, here's the deal. You have to pay me money and you have to work with me for at least a few months. And that was how I accidentally got my first client. And that's when I started seeing people have results. So that's when I figured, oh, wait, maybe there's something to this. So I kind of just declared it and became a coach. And I was already a business coach. And then a few years in, you know, again, it was through the medicine work. I had already done a bunch of online summits and, you know, put myself out there, becoming known as just like a business coach. But then I was hiding my spiritual path. I was especially hiding the medicine and psychedelics, like big time. And for a few years through medicine work, you know, I was down in Peru doing these dietas and going in pretty deep. It kept telling me to talk about my psychedelic path. And I was like, oh my God, no, like no one can know about this except my group of friends. And I finally got up the courage. And by the time I, you know, had this clear vision that was like, make a summit about psychedelics, you know, I was like, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to go all in, like all or nothing. I can't just be like tiptoeing around this. So it was funny. I am good friends with this guy named East Forest, who's a musician and kind of the psychedelic world as well. And he had always kind of hit it too. And it's funny, the exact month that I decided to make my first psychedelic summit, it was back in 2018. It was the exact same month that he came out with an official album called Music for Mushrooms. And I was like, okay.
I know it's first. This music is good.
Yeah. And it actually just felt like validated to see, like, you know, the media had already started talking about psychedelics, and I had started, you know, I had known about the Michael Pollan book a few years before it got published. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. Like, it's actually, maybe it's going to be okay to talk about. So the day I decided to do it, it was like I was being validated by the universe that it was going to be okay. And in 2019, my big Psychedelics on Purpose Summit came out. And that's kind of how I got more into the psychedelic, you know, path publicly. Because as a regular business coach a few years before, I was already helping a bunch of medicine people. You know, honestly, I don't even know how I got them as clients. Like, I had a client in Australia that was working with ayahuasca, and I'm like, well, wait, this is really nice to be working with people who understood my spiritual path and I understood their path. And I could actually help them integrate the medicine work and the psychedelic work into their business. And it's, you know, because even my own business coach at the time, it's like, she didn't really understand that path I was on. And I realized, like, well, wait a second, people that are working with psychedelics, especially regularly, like, they need help integrating it into more than just their day-to-day, but it's also their work, their purpose, their business, their career, like everything we do, you know, because we're all, you know, we're beings, we're not just divided into these sections. So that's how I became kind of this psychedelic business coach. I do help a lot of people, you know, starting and growing psychedelic businesses, but not all my clients. You know, a lot of my clients are just on a spiritual path, becoming coaches, healers. You know, I work with a bunch of therapists, people who are transitioning their businesses or transitioning their careers. But yeah, over the years, I guess I've become known as this like psychedelic business coach, because it's this group of people that I understand and they understand me. And it feels really good to have someone who gets you when you're, you know, going through that process. Absolutely. So that's a story. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. This is an amazing story. I love it. And I feel like that's why we are probably talking today, because I'm totally a psychedelic businesswoman. Like, I love psychedelics. And also I've only started talking about it openly recently when one of my besties did ayahuasca, and she was like, Caro, you have been this alien-like octopus healer, and you're a medicine woman, and you're supposed to talk about it. Why don't you tell people about it? Like, you're healing everyone. Why don't you I'm like, okay, if I got this kind of like feedback from her, I'm gonna talk about it. And I literally started talking about it this year, because before, especially here in Poland where I'm from, it's like such a no to talk about it all. And even if I even post about weed, like how weed, as you know, I'm in Costa Rica, shamans have been using weed here for ages. Even if I post about it, I already get calls from my family like, don't talk about this on social media, like, you know, you're not supposed. And I'm just like, oh. But I'm actually feeling like the world is opening. So I'm curious to know whether you, as a psychedelic business coach, you put yourself out there. Did you have any like super negative feedback? I mean, okay, negative feedback we're always gonna get, right? But did you have any like actual problems, or was it just people talking, which is not really a real problem, because people talk always and they will talk. So like, haters gonna hate, so whatever, right?
Exactly.
But did you have any actual real problems, like putting yourself out there?
You know, it's funny because I was so scared. I mean, I even looked into getting a lawyer. I thought I was going to have like police coming to my door. I thought my neighbors were going to come after me. Like, I really thought my life was going to, you know, especially like I was like, oh my God, what's going to happen? The biggest fear I had was actually my own medicine community. Like, there's a community of people where we, work with medicine. And I had sat with my shaman in Peru and had a talk with him about this before I came out. And I said, look, I'm about to do this summit and and he was like very supportive of it. I don't know if he understood what a summit was, but he understood that I was about to talk about it very publicly. The few things that I've been very careful about is like, I never name where I do this work, especially when I do it illegally in the US. Like, I'm very just, like I believe in like the truth of like, well, I don't want to get anybody in trouble, especially because it is still mostly illegal where I live. The only like, here's what was weird is right when I came out, the friends who I thought were going to disown me, they actually were like really supportive. And not only that, now that it's been 4 or 5 years later, a lot of them have actually started their own psychedelic businesses too. So it kind of gave them the freedom. Yeah, it gave them this like permission to go ahead and, one of them became a coach. One of them started a psychedelic app. The other one, is now like creating a cannabis farm, things like that. Someone wrote a book, it was just really amazing. Of course, like you said, once in a while, I would say 1 out of every 5,000 people like will write me something like about ayahuasca should be free or mushrooms should, and I'm like, whatever. One hater out of like many thousand. I only had one friend who kind of just disappeared, and honestly, she wasn't a good friend. Because and she never explained why. I think she was just a little cautious and like, but guess what? The girl is broke. She's like not doing anything with her life. And she's probably sitting there going like, oh, maybe I should come out about psychedelics too. I mean, and that's the thing. This happened to me with my previous business as well. Like, and that's the thing. It has nothing to do with psychedelics. And I'm sure you know this. Even when I came out as, like with my running clothing brand. So I started this running clothing brand in 2013. And I was really scared then too. I was like, oh my God, what are people going to think? And even then I had a friend call me insane. Like a good friend actually said, are you delusional? You have to remember, like, people get jealous. People don't understand risk takers when you're a risk taker. Some people are just like love to be in their comfort zone for 20 years. And I'm like you, I'm like a manifesting generator. I've always been very like a go-getter, just go after what I want. And also I'm really about like living life fully. Mm-hmm. And, people will think you're crazy, even if you go become a life coach, or if you go accept that you have healing gifts and you're a healer. It's like healers, I've seen this over the years where healers struggle like immensely with like, are people going to think I'm weird? Or what about my spiritual gifts? And like people, my family's going to disown me. Even my family was just kind of like, whatever, but I think it was when I started the running clothing brand that my family thought I was crazier. I think maybe by the time it came out with psychedelics, they were just like, whatever. But it's, the one thing I say to my clients all the time is like, we are not here to live our lives for others. We are here as sovereign beings to really like know that we've incarnated here for some divine purpose. It doesn't have to be healing or helping people or whatever. It could be being an artist or just, farming, whatever it is. But you're here to be yourself truly and like be connected to this soul's path of what you've come here to do. And if we continuously live our lives in fear of judgment or fear of being canceled on the internet or whatever, it's like you're not living an authentic, true life. And it's like, what good is it? We're only here once, well, in this incarnation, and we don't know when it's going to end. It could end tomorrow, today, you could die today. So it's like this concept of constantly living in fear of what will people think, and I feel like an imposter. It's all just like your mind taking over. And if you can just start to shift your perspective and see that it's, this ego part of your mind that wants to keep you small and always wants to keep you stuck and comfortable, and you actually start listening to your higher self, which is this, this guidance, this higher self that's bringing you to the path of your divine, what I would call like the divine, like heart alignment, then it's like life becomes magical and it becomes so much more fun. And you actually start enjoying like, hey, I get to make money doing what I love. I get to live in Costa Rica. I get to, hang out with people on podcasts. Or you can just stay stuck living in fear the rest of your life. And then what? When you're like 90 years old on your deathbed, like I saw this with my father. I think that's why like things just shifted with me, because my dad didn't hate, I don't think he hated his job, but I knew he was like never really happy with it. He was kind of like just going through those emotions, stayed very comfortable. And then I think what happened is like he retired and it was like, well, now I'm old. And then all of a sudden he died a few years later. And it's like, that's so sad to think that you live your life just programmed to be a certain way. And then that's it. And it's like, I don't ever want to have regrets about life. And that was where I just was like, screw it. I don't care if I lose friends. This is what's calling me. Like, it was literally, I didn't want to come out about psychedelics. It was like eating me alive. It kept coming through and coming through. And I actually finally brought it up. I was in a mastermind group with some other people, with a business coach. And I said something, I was like, I keep getting these downloads that it's telling me to like talk about this, and I really don't want to. And that's when everybody was like, oh my God, you have to talk about this. Like, it's coming through you. It's like we are divine channels. And if it comes through, we have to pay attention, or else it's like literally you are living a lie. And I'm sure you know this, you've probably seen it with clients. The longer we live these like lies and stay stuck, when the divine wants us to do something else, I always say, if you don't take action first, the universe will do it for you.
Yes.
Like I had a few near-death illnesses, like mystery things happen, like these like weird initiations where I'm like on my deathbed and I'm like, I don't even know why. But then, it's like, I believe that the universe will break you down over and over and over until you actually go make the changes. And so that's what I always say to people that are scared. It's like, well, okay, you can actually start to make, small changes now, like step by step, or you can wait until you have some crazy shit happen, like, near-death illnesses, or you lose someone special, or, your whole life implodes, or you lose your job, whatever it is. Happens all the time. So it's like, well, why not just start to take the steps?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I vibe with so many things that you said as well, because it was a very similar process for me. I lost a lot of friends or whatever when I was on my spiritual path, but that's a part of the process, because your vibe changes, especially when you work with the medicine. It changes rapidly. These are quantum leaps we're talking about. So obviously a lot of people are just not going to resonate with you, and a lot of people are going to also resist you, because if you, for example, were quite submissive and didn't have your own like opinion before, and now suddenly you do, then it's like a boom. It's like, oh my God, what is this person? Like, I don't know her anymore and stuff. So we just need to deal with it. But I'm also curious to know, because you probably work with a lot of people like healers, coaches, and people like on their spiritual path. And this podcast is a lot about healing and coaching. So I'm guessing that a lot of audience would also be interested in that. What do you feel like are the top few mistakes, maybe 3 to 5 or something like that, that people make in their business? Like when they maybe, okay, I'm starting a business and I have maybe like few clients, maybe 2 clients here and there, because I just spoke to a friend and then their mom wanted the healing or whatever, but I still am not established. I still don't know. What are the biggest mistakes? And also, after we talk about mistakes, like how to solve them. And I'm sure you've had so much experience with so many people that you probably know some distilled biggest, like let's say 80-20 rule, right? Like the 20% that we need to know, like if we solve this shit, then things are going to flow way easier.
Yes. And yeah, I'm glad you brought this up. So I have my signature program is this group mastermind program where it's like, if you're serious about starting up coaching, healing business, or if you've started and you're not really making money, that's the program. And when I see people like this, maybe they started their business a year, 2, 3 years ago, and they're like, they get a client here and there, like you just said, like someone's mom or a friend or whatever. And then they're like, but I'm stuck. I'm not getting more clients. I don't know what's going on. I put up, Instagram and What happens is, because I get a lot of people joining my mastermind like this, people skip steps. So people think, because as I always say, there's a lot of illusion out there on the internet. Unfortunately, the internet is this world of illusions, meaning people see people with 20,000 followers and they think they're making millions. And guess what? They're actually, a lot of them are barely making money, or they see, thousands of people liked this post. Oh, she must be successful. And it's like, well, actually, no, they don't even have any clients. So it's this world of illusion. And people think like, well, if I just, post on Instagram or post on Facebook and maybe put up a website and I'll get clients. And what they see is like, that's not the reality. There's so much more to it. So I see this all the time where people, they skip steps number 1 through, let's say 10, or even 1 through 5. And they start with these more advanced, let's say posting on the internet, posting on social media. They think, oh, I'll just get clients by posting on Instagram. But what they're missing is this foundational piece that I call the root chakra of your business. It's literally the chakra system. If you don't understand the clarity in your business, who exactly you're here to serve, how to effectively communicate to your ideal clients, if you don't even understand who your ideal clients are and what they want and what they need, then how is your Instagram post or your website or a Facebook post going to attract in clients? It's like you're skipping the most important steps in your entire business. And this is one of the biggest mistakes I see all the time, where people think like, I don't understand. I'm writing this 4 times a week and I'm not getting clients. Well, you're missing this whole foundational piece, this root chakra of your business, including certain structures and processes. And, it's like building a house. You cannot build a house by starting with the decorations. You have to build a foundation of, dig a hole in the ground and lay some concrete down, and then frame the house, and then you put up all the walls, and that's how you build a business. And I see this all the time where people just think like, oh, maybe if I go run an ad on, Facebook, I'll get people buying my online course. And then they go spend $10,000 or even more. And they're like, I don't understand. I only made like $300 from my course, or even like $2,000 from my course, but you spend $20,000. It's like, well, if you don't actually know the effective way to communicate and understanding who your ideal clients are and how your program, your offer, or your course really serves them, then there's this disconnect in your business. And it's only that connection in the middle that will make you the money. And so this is where I see people all the time where they're like trying all the things, and maybe they've even, I see people all the time, like I start a podcast, or I wrote a book, or I do these workshops, but they're not even clear on their offering. I've seen clients come to my program where they have like 12 different offerings, and I'm like, I don't even understand what you do. So it's like these very foundational pieces of business They actually add up very quickly, meaning like step 1, step 2, step 3. You can get clients in 3 steps. Like I have a 9-week program, that's one of my other programs, 9 weeks and you can get clients. It's like, but then you find people that are struggling in their business for 1, 2, 3, 4 years. I mean, even longer sometimes. And it's like, well, you kind of have to wonder what's going on. Like if your business isn't able to fully support you, there's a disconnect in your business. And that's what I see constantly. And, I hate to say it, but a lot of times it's because people, they don't have support. They don't learn how to make money. They don't have the business know-how. Like the reality is, I was, not to say I was born an entrepreneur, but I've always been very naturally entrepreneurial, like since I was a kid. I also spent 15 years in corporate and tech startups growing and scaling businesses for a living. Like that's literally what I got paid to do. So by the time I launched, I've had 3 businesses. And by the time I launched my other 2, I had some, like foundational pieces that I just knew because I had spent so long at, learning. But even then I still had a coach. I still had mentors. I still learned how to, do marketing the right way. I still learn how to be strategic in my business. And that's the reality where I say to people, look, if you're not really making money in your business, how long are you going to put up with that? So you either know how, or you hire someone to teach you. It's kind of like a no-brainer. So yes, it costs money to hire a coach, but then you think of like, okay, my first business coach, I could barely afford to pay for at the time, but I knew that I needed it. And guess what? That investment has paid for itself, thousands of times over, like thousands. And it's like, well, of course that was a good investment. So these are like the little steps. And it's like, honestly, it's like spirituality. The way I teach business, it's really the path of least resistance. It's very simple. It doesn't need to be these like crazy technical things and like investing $50,000 in your business. It's like, no, actually, there are very simple, easy ways to start and grow your business and get clients and make money. And the problem is with today's world of like noise everywhere and like every day there's a new app or a new platform or new this and it's like a busy, noisy world that we live in. And then people get like, they get overwhelmed. They're like, I'm trying to do this and this and this and this and this. And I'm like, okay, come back to like the very simple first step. It's like a presence practice. And that's where I tell people, I'm like, it's, again, like people get caught up in the illusion of what they think they should do when it's really super simple steps. And that's where I've proven it over and over and over for years. I've been running my mastermind for, I don't know, now 6 years, 7 years. And it's like over and over and over, people get clients with like the most simple path of least resistance. But it's an art form. There's an art form to really knowing who you're speaking to and how to effectively communicate. And then there's much more to it than that. But I see this all the time. And I also, this also goes hand in hand with what what we were talking about earlier. I also see people just get stuck in fear. Like that's one of the other mistakes. It's like, okay, I get it. Like, I don't love doing videos. I don't love being on social media. I don't love having to, speak all the time. But I've always put like my deeper mission in like what I want to see change in the world, how I want to help people, the kind of world I want to co-create. I've always put that before, how I feel, meaning like, I actually really believe that we could have an awakened, beautiful new earth in our lifetime before I die. This is like my biggest prayer. I'm like, yes, shit is crazy right now, but it's also changing. And I do believe that there is a path of the heart where people really can enjoy life and be supported by work they love. And I really hate seeing people like constantly miserable like I was for 20 years. So that's where if you're so stuck in your fear of, imposter syndrome and being seen, it's like it's only going to imprison you longer and longer and longer. So this is where having a coach is so important to get you past these blocks and these limiting beliefs and these, mindset issues, because they are all fabrications of the human mind. That is all they are. They're not actually real. When people have a fear of putting themselves out there, it's like, do you actually know that your friends are gonna, say anything to you? Like, I thought all my friends were gonna disown me. I had one out of like hundreds and thousands of people like just disappear. She didn't even disown me. She just disappeared. And I could care less now because I'm like, whatever. I have like, hundreds of newer friends that are even more, like you said, like at my vibration, at a different level. So it's like, what is this fear all about? But so many people are just stuck in the downward spiral of fear. And that's where it's like, like it pains me to see people just suffering like that. I'm sure you see it all the time too.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's our job as coaches and healers to get people out of these. And also, speaking on that, I would be curious to know if you noticed also some patterns in beliefs, like specific thoughts that people are thinking. Like, okay, if one of them, as you mentioned, is like, okay, I'm not gonna put myself out there because all my friends are gonna and family are gonna disown me. But do you find any other common beliefs that can block people that people are not even aware of? Because that's what with beliefs, right? It's so subconscious that people don't even know that they have them until they just look deeper and they're like, oh shit, there are so many blocks and I'm actually sabotaging myself because there are so many parts of me telling me, okay, this is gonna happen, or I'm gonna be punished if I do this, or I'm gonna, so do you feel some commonalities in between?
Yes. One of the biggest beliefs, or like subconscious limiting beliefs that I see, that I talk about a lot actually in like a lot of my free workshops that I do and my program, there's a lot of people that have this, what I would call imposter syndrome, where they feel like I need to do more training and I'm not ready, I'm not capable enough, I haven't gotten this certificate, I haven't done this, I've only done that. Maybe literally I see this all the time. People come to my mastermind where they've done, coach training and psychedelic integration training and breathwork facilitation and Reiki and yoga and meditation. They've done all this training and they still don't feel good enough. And I'm like, when are you going to be ready? When you're 90? Like, when do you know you're good enough to help people and accept a client? And usually this is a limiting belief, but usually what's underneath it is this deep core wounding of like not feeling worthy enough in general. It's like, it's a prevalent wounding in our society where, like, especially with women too, where we never feel enough. We never feel worthy. We don't feel worthy of money. We don't feel worthy of love, of having a dream home, of having a dream life. It's like people feel like, who am I to do this? Like, what will people think? And it's this deep wounding underneath it, which is like, and a lot of this, I do believe is like ancestral, but it's our parenting, our programming of like, you're never good enough. Like, especially at least here in America, our entire society is, it's based around like grades and how well you do and how much money you make and it's this programming. So of course people are constantly comparing, and now with the, social media and everything on the internet, people feel worse about themselves than ever. So they never feel good enough. They never feel, worthy enough or deserving enough, which is really what's underneath that imposter syndrome. So the need to go do, like, I literally have people apply to my program all the time who have spent 10, 15 years doing training after training and getting a certificate and a different certificate and another certificate, like literally spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on training. And they're like, oh, but I'm not ready to help people yet. And I'm like, okay, you're like 48 years old. You've just spent 15 years training. Like, when are you ready? It's like, that's, of course, it's a mindset issue, and the reality is, and this, it's like, to me, I really believe like human beings are all on a path, and there is no such thing as ever being like ready or qualified. It's like, if you're here, you're qualified to help people where you were, a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago. It's like, we all know there's like 22-year-old life coaches making, multiple six figures. Who's to say they're worthy and you're not, when you're like, 39 years old and you've like been on a healing journey for the last 15 years? Why is the 22-year-old allowed to make $500,000 and you're not good enough yet? The only difference between that person and you is your belief around like yourself. And this is what I see all the time, is people just don't believe in themselves because they've been programmed and they have this deep core wounding, which is why I bring in somatic therapy, embodiment work, mindset reprogramming, subconscious reprogramming. I bring in all of this into my business coaching because it's not just about marketing and strategies. The reality is you can learn all the marketing, but if you don't believe in it and you have this running program constantly telling you that you're not worthy, you're not good enough, your marketing won't work. It's like the energy, people see through the energy, people feel energy, and you can feel the energy behind everybody. So it's like when you see someone on the internet, like you can feel if they're like, vibing with you. It's all, especially people on the medicine path or on a spiritual path, you can feel when people are like coming from the wrong place. Like it feels off. And those are the people that struggle in their business because there's a disconnect between what they're putting out there and what they're really feeling inside. So to me, it's actually a very internal game of growing a business. It's like you have to master your mind, your body, your soul, your spirit at the same time as you learn the business stuff, like the strategies, the processes, the foundations. And that's why my program has like, astrology and energy work and, other healing modalities in addition to like the 3D, like earthly business strategies, because it's both. And like you've said, it's like, there's so many limiting beliefs running our entire society. It's like, I really think it's at the core of like our large issues in this world,
Absolutely. And also, based on what you said, I also feel like it's very individual matter what feels aligned and vibing with you versus someone else. Because like I've, for example, tried in my business following people that I knew and they had success in what they are doing, and it just didn't work for me because I have a different energy and I have a different human design and I have a different personality, and things that work for others are not going to necessarily work for me. So I need to listen to myself, to my own intuition, to my own gut instinct, to my own energy as well, and to how I want to live my life, and then set it up in a way that is aligned for me. Because as you said, it's a path of least resistance. So you cannot just do what others do and feel super resistant to it. Because for example, when I launched my Facebook ads on my own, I felt super resistant. Like I felt like, okay, I'm gonna learn this shit because it's gonna help me. But then I did like 2 hours of Facebook ads course. I'm like, no, absolutely no, I'm not gonna learn it. I'm not gonna do it. I'm gonna do it, find a different way to market myself, because it's just not vibing. I just cannot spend my time learning about the things that I don't care about. So I feel like it's always about the alignment and about finding for yourself things that work for you, because there are so many different ways how you can market yourself based on your gifts, based on your talents. Are you more withdrawn and more introverted than maybe talking to people on the street or running massive public events? Maybe it's not your way. Maybe you need to do it in a different way. But for me, if I'm extroverted, I can go just in Nosara, Costa Rica on the beach and meet clients there because I just speak to people, right? Like it's just very different for everyone. And I feel like that's really great how you talk about the path of least resistance, because I feel like everything in our life should be like this. Every kind of relationship, business, way of being or whatever should be the path of least resistance. So I feel like if there is anything that I will get out of it, this whole conversation, like a cherry on the cake, is just to remember this, that it's not supposed to be a struggle. It's not supposed to be like hard for us, right? It's supposed to be challenging at times, but not like a struggle. So just wanted to add this to all you said.
Exactly. There's a difference between like the struggle, which I do believe a lot of people are like addicted to, again, because of programming. Like they think they need to struggle. I went through that years ago. But it's like, yes, there's work. Yes, there's challenges. Yes, there's, times that are busier than others, but it doesn't mean you're like struggling or suffering, And I'm so glad you said that. It's like a huge difference. I love it.
Thank you. And I would also like to ask one last question, because I know you got to go. What is the best way to find your programs and your content, and where can people find you? What's the best way?
Perfect. So I'm on the internet all over at BethAWeinstein.com, Beth A. Weinstein on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook, Beth Weinstein. I also have a Facebook group all about psychedelics, sacred medicines, and purpose. There's like almost 7,000 or 8,000 people in there. It's a great community. I don't know when this is being published, but my mastermind program starts at the end of January. You can join up until probably around the end of February is when I suggest joining by. I also have a 9-week intensive program and do offer private coaching and do have some other, my psychedelic summits for sale and other things on my website and other programs coming up. And I do have 2 free trainings. If you want to download those, they're right on my website. One is about growing a spiritual business, how to get clients. The other is specifically about how to start and grow a psychedelic business or bring psychedelics and sacred medicines into your work so you can integrate it in. And yeah,
Amazing.
That's it. I would love, or reach out to Karolina and we'll connect there.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing everything. I love everything you shared. I vibe with it so much, with everything that you said. So I'm super grateful that you agreed to be on our podcast and share yourself with our audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I can't wait to hang out with you in Costa Rica, hopefully this spring.
I know. It's going to be great.
We'll definitely meet there.